All right, so when I say war in the Middle East, what's the first word that pops into your head? For pretty much everyone, it's oil, right? For decades, that's been the strategic prize. But the game is changing, the battlefields are shifting, and the next major conflict, well, it might be fought over something way, way more essential.
I mean, think about it. We could somehow manage in a world without oil. It would be a huge mess, don't get me wrong, a massive disruption, but we'd adapt. But a world without water, that's not a disruption. That's game over. It's a full-blown existential threat. And right now, in the Middle East, that threat is becoming alarmingly real. The stakes here couldn't be clearer. An oil shortage, that hits the economy. It messes up commerce. It's a matter of wealth. But a water shortage, that hits you directly. That's a matter of survival. It doesn't just disrupt life. It literally ends it. We're not talking about wealth anymore. We're talking about existence. And that is precisely why water infrastructure is becoming the new strategic bullseye.
So to really get why this is such a powder keg, we first have to understand the truly unique and incredibly fragile situation in the Gulf states. Their very survival hangs by a single, man-made thread.
Let's just state the obvious environmental reality. The climate there is brutally arid. Rainfall is practically a myth. A single day of rain in Dubai is major news. Temperatures are, of course, incredibly high. And here's the most important part. Unlike most of the world, there are no major permanent rivers. No Nile, no Mississippi, nothing to draw from.
Just pause and think about that for a second. An entire nation with no permanent natural source of fresh water. Saudi Arabia has no permanent rivers. Kuwait has no natural fresh water at all. Their only option is to look to the sea. And here's what that looks like in practice. For countries like Kuwait and Qatar, virtually 100% of their drinking water comes from desalination, turning seawater into fresh water. And for the heavyweights like the UAE and Saudi Arabia, it's basically the same story. They are totally and completely dependent on this one technology. So, how in the world do you actually make an ocean drinkable for millions of people? Well, it comes down to some massive industrial-scale technology that works on two main principles. The first method is called reverse osmosis, or RO. You might even have a small version of this under your sink. But just imagine that on an unbelievable scale. It uses immense pressure to literally squeeze seawater through a special membrane. The tiny water molecules get through, but the salt and all the other impurities get left behind. The big advantage here is that it's relatively energy efficient. The second and older method is thermal distillation. This is basically the same way nature makes rain, just in a giant factory. You boil massive amounts of seawater. That creates steam, which is pure water vapor. You then collect that steam and condense it back into fresh water, leaving all the salt behind. The downside? It uses a colossal amount of energy. That's why these plants are often built right alongside power plants. And just to give you a sense of the scale we're talking about, get this, the Gulf region alone is home to 40% of the entire world's desalination capacity. Over 100 million people there depend on this manufactured water every single day. But here is the crux of the issue. This technological marvel, this lifeline for an entire region, is also its greatest weakness. It's a massive strategic vulnerability, a single point of failure for an entire civilization. The system really has 4 key weaknesses. 1. The plants have to be on the coast to get seawater, which makes them sitting ducks for missiles, drones, or naval attacks. 2. The system is highly centralized. We're not talking about thousands of small plants. We're talking about a few enormous ones. Knock out one, and you cut off water for millions. 3. They are completely dependent on electricity. Destroy the power grid, and the desalination plants just go dark. And finally, the most terrifying vulnerability of all is their storage capacity. Most Gulf countries have only 3 to 7 days of freshwater reserves. Let that sink in. Not 3 months, not 3 weeks, 3 to 7 days. If the desalination plants stop working, we're not talking about a crisis in the future. We're talking about a society-level catastrophe in less than a week. So what would actually happen if this system were successfully attacked? This wouldn't be a slow decline. It would be a rapid, cascading collapse of society's most basic functions. The first domino to fall is the most obvious one. Within days, the taps in major cities like Riyadh or Dubai would simply run dry. There would be no drinkable water for millions of people. Period. Immediately after that, sanitation systems would completely break down. Without water to flush waste, sewage systems fail, creating a massive risk for the rapid spread of diseases like cholera. Then hospitals would be paralyzed. They rely on huge quantities of water for literally everything: sterilization, dialysis, basic surgeries. Without it, modern medical care essentially just stops. And finally, the economy would grind to a halt. Industries that require water would have to shut down. Mass panic would set in as citizens scramble for the last remaining supplies.
And this brings us right back to that core idea. You can't eat money. You can't drink oil. When the water is gone, everything else is gone.
And check this out. Here's a fascinating indirect threat. We always think about the Strait of Hormuz and the risk of an oil blockade. But what if a tanker is attacked and sinks? A massive oil spill in the Persian Gulf could contaminate the very seawater that feeds these desalination plants, forcing them to shut down. A conflict that starts over oil could inadvertently trigger a catastrophic water crisis. So, what does all of this mean for the future? It means our entire understanding of what warfare even is. It needs to evolve. The new battlefields are a nation's lifelines. The goal isn't just to defeat an army anymore. It's to paralyze the society that army protects by targeting the critical infrastructure that makes modern life possible in the first place. We already see this happening all the time. Adversaries target power grids, they target internet cables and communication networks, and now, as we've just seen, the most essential infrastructure of all, water supplies, has officially entered the crosshairs. And this leaves us with a final, sobering question. Our advanced technology has created wonders, right? It lets millions of people thrive in some of the most inhospitable places on Earth. But in doing so, has it also created a new kind of fragility? A vulnerability so total that the decisive act of a future war might not be a battle at all, but simply someone, somewhere, flipping a switch on the systems we can no longer live without.